Welcome back. Well, we continue with our focus on the VAT hike reversal. We speak now to Build One South Africa leader, Mr. Mmusi Maimane. Mr. Maimane, a good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. You know, obviously, I'm sure you feel, quite victorious at being able to, give us the announcement that you did this morning alongside other parties. Now, there are so many questions about the future, but I want to start here. Helen Zille of the Democratic Alliance says the reversal of this VAT hike is as a result of the pivotal role of the Democratic Alliance and not so much the work of yourselves, including Bosa, Action SA and other parties of the GNU. I think a good place to start is what do you say about that?
Good evening and good evening to fellow South Africans. I mean, I think first of all, before anyone is chest beating about who the victory is, the ultimate victors in this issue are South Africans and the South African economy. That's what we've got to focus on. Now, the statement by Helen Zille can never be further from the truth. I'm a bit baffled about what exactly have they achieved. This is a party that entered government. It did not table a plan. It instead decided to put South Africans under pressure by being in a government and then making a decision to go to court and take the same government it is a part of to court, and ultimately lead us into what could nearly become a more budget crisis in the absence of a fiscal framework where departments would have to spend 45%. So how then do you become one who puts people near drowning, then take them to court? A court has not ruled. Now suddenly you want to claim to be a hero. I think Helen Zille needs to be able to come and explain to the people of South Africa where, in fact, she and her party have hated them. Because what we've got to look at now, and more crucially, is about the fact that even if they had won in court, the court would always have to direct Parliament to do the job. Because that's where laws are made, that's where legislation is set, that's where, in many ways, fiscal frameworks are determined. And they had the privilege of serving in cabinet and failed, and rather ran to the courts when they could not win an argument there. I just find their comment really a bridge too far, distasteful, and ultimately claiming easy victories that do not exist. Whereas I think what we all should focus on, and including the DA, I want them to encourage them, rather than trying to claim easy victories. Let's now focus on how we get this process underway, get it through Parliament, and ensure that the VAT hike is removed as it has been, and now we take as to how we reform the economy to build it forward.
Yeah, I've heard some intelligent people say how is usually the toughest question to answer, and that's the one I'm going to give to you now. We've got a shortfall. Yes, there is that reprieve of, all right, we're reversing the 0.5 percentage point. But what do we do now? That is the question.
Yeah, certainly. These are first of all, and as I'd said earlier on today, I want to say to the people of this country, this is a new terrain. We've never been here before. We've always had one party with an outright majority to do with it what it wants. Now, we're working on a coalition, and internationally, these are hard lessons to try and get through. And so I want to ask South Africans, firstly, to be patient, to come along with the journey, make their submissions, because this is their budget at the end of the day, and work with the legislative process so that we can achieve. So on the first instance, that's the mechanisms and the process bit. The minister has already tabled a rates bill to which, in consultation with the Speaker of the National Assembly, we will then have to process that particular bill through Parliament itself. Because the fiscal framework is in court at the moment, that is an unknown variable as to what the determination around that will be. The second is that a division of revenue bill and the appropriation bill have been withdrawn. But those only need to be passed within 4 months of the financial year. So we still have until July to get those through. So there isn't an urgency on that score. In as far as dealing with the shortfall that would have been envisaged by VAT, which was 16 billion rands or their roundabouts, let's understand two aspects. The first is about revenue raising mechanisms and part of the submissions in this process. And I wish people like Helen Zille and all of them would actually participate in being able to be creative in coming up with where we raise revenue. So the first aspect that we've already began working on, and I've been engaging with the Minister of Department of Trade and Industry to say, let us amend the law to make online gambling inclusive of sports betting and other aspects. Once you've done that, you are able to then levy it as a sin tax, as you would alcohol, as you would tobacco, and that has potential in the medium term to raise about 65 billion rands.
Yep.
What Treasury raised, that it's a revenue loss of 75 billion rands, that's over the medium term, which is over 3 years. So now we have to find that revenue part. And then the second and last aspect is that when you deal with the expenditure cycle, we've already began as the Appropriations Committee looking at some of the expenditure reviews so that we can ensure that there's actually efficiency, and where there are losses, we can find some savings so that we can offset that need for that increase. And SARS have already demonstrated, having given the additional funding, an increase in the amount of money they've been able to collect.
I need to ask you this, because we just came out of a discussion with the MK party where they are demanding the resignation of the finance minister, the EFF making the same sort of demands. And I want to hear from Bosa's perspective. Do you hold confidence in the ability and capabilities of our finance minister, Enoch Godongwana?
Absolutely. I think it's madness to suggest that the Minister of Finance needs to resign. Here, a Minister of Finance is tabling budget, is ensuring that the process is compliant with law, is actually accommodative of the views of different political parties in a new terrain of multi-party democracy. And ultimately, not only is in doing that, it's about ensuring that the other spheres of government, whether those are provinces and municipalities, are functional. So on that basis, it would be not only irresponsible as a people of South Africa to keep having a revolving door of finance ministers in an international geopolitical uncertainty, that would be an irresponsible decision. And more than anything, I certainly believe that in my engagements with Minister Godongwana, and by extension, Treasury, this is one of the institutions that we have found are resolute, are strong, and we have to keep engaging with them. And what some of the changes that need to happen is about how we make the budgeting process, how we adjust for it, how do we make sure that the reviews that achieve growth are then put forward. And I find that it is better to work with a Treasury that is willing to hear, engage, but bring the technical expertise than some form of cooked up economic plan that hasn't proven to work. And now suddenly we have to now be able to be changing finance ministers. I think it'd be irresponsible.
There'd probably be quite a few people that are curious to hear your answer to this question. This image that we saw this morning of Bosa working alongside other political parties, as well as Action SA, do you believe that there is a place for Bosa inside the government of national unity?
Well, when we worked on the fiscal framework, we did so not because we wanted a position, or not because we did so because we wanted to get a budget that is workable. You see, we the question before Parliament wasn't do you want VAT or not VAT? It was, do you want a fiscal framework, of which, yes, one component is VAT, but there are other issues, education and all of those, that we had to consider. So that's what we worked with. On a follow-up conversation about whether or not there's room for a GNU, etc. As Build One South Africa, we've always been deliberate to say, we believe we have a contribution to make. We have a function in terms of ensuring that we steer the economy in the right direction in education. And if it were needed that we serve within a GNU government to be able to do so, we'd certainly do. But what we are not sitting here saying is that this was in exchange for that. And furthermore, that the role that we play now is then less important in being able to hold the executive to account and make sure that the appropriations bill is in fact processed properly and the work of Parliament. So I say that to you to mean that should there be a need for reconfiguration and a conversation to take it forward, we'd be open to engage and discuss. But again, let me highlight the ultimate condition is always that let's create a plan that works. Let's ensure that we can all walk into the room having agreed on what future prospects of South Africa are like. And once you have that, you can charter a way forward collectively. But if you sit and there's confusion, you end up with a cabinet that disagrees on bills, that doesn't have a plan at times, as what has happened now to the DA. And I think that now is a great opportunity for us to reset, set up goals, give a budget that reflects those goals, and then go from there.
Right. Lots for us to unpack with our analysts, and that's what we're going to do on the other side of this. Mr. Maimane, we really do appreciate your time. Mmusi Maimane, the leader of Build One South Africa.